He tried to kill me. 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 Oof. This is gonna be a rough one. Hi guys, welcome to chapter 4 of the Castor Saga. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen our first, second, or third chapter, this is number 4. Spoiler alert, you have been warned. Chapter 4. The Forest of Burns. Warning, this episode may have some triggering material. The Forest of Burns. Tony looked all around him and saw Meli sitting straight up with her things in their place. She seemed to be very organized in the way she kept her stuff. The table with food had been removed again. Everyone around them was either sitting up straight or lulled over asleep. Those asleep were literally unconscious and couldn't be woken up. The conductor was standing at the front, not moving an inch, as he leaned against the wall, staring at the casters. Only his eyes moved to keep an eye on everyone, but his body didn't flinch. Outside the train, the ground was dark and burnt. The trees outside were black like charcoal, and the limbs of the darkened trees had small flames burning off the ends. Tony turned to try and wake one of the sleepers up, but Meli grabbed his hand, pulling him over by her. He looked at her slightly confused, but noticed she had again froze in her spot, not even moving to look at him. She quietly spoke, but her voice made him nervous. "Tony, don't move. What's going on?" She held his hand tightly, and when he spoke, she dug her nails into the palm of his hand. He stayed quiet and stared ahead, not moving a single muscle in his body. He held his breath as a darker-looking version of the angel spirits they saw yesterday floated past him and Meli. These spirits didn't look angelic at all. They looked dark, demonic, ghostly. The creature hovered down the aisle back between them and the other seats on the right side of the train. The dark creature grabbed one young man at the front of the train car, who was unconscious, and slowly began moving with him out the window. Several others appeared and began taking sleeping people. Rose and John, who were both awake and had chosen each other as partners, were terrified, and you could see it on their faces. All the sleeping people had been taken away, but one dark spirit had come back, even though everyone on the train who was awake should have been allowed to pass. It slowly started moving over towards John and Rose. Its dark, glowing red eyes stared directly into them. John couldn't take it anymore. In one quick movement, he pushed Rose over into the dark spirit. She screamed loudly as the creature grabbed her by her long, dark blonde hair and started dragging her towards the window at the front of the train from where it had come, but it wasn't going anywhere. As the dark spirit tried to escape, the conductor had pulled out an old revolver and pointed it at the creature. "Hiya." He pulled the trigger and the creature was blasted into black dust. Rose stood up frightened. The conductor grabbed her and pushed her into the train car ahead of the one they were currently in. "Everyone to the next car, now!" Tony looked at Meli, who stood as he did, and everyone began rushing towards the other train car. Suddenly, several dark spirits began descending on the car from above the skylights and started grabbing people and pulling them through. About 15 casters made it to the next car, including Rose and John. Meli and Tony stood at the back with the conductor as he disconnected the car coupling that held the cars together. The back few cars of the train suddenly stopped following them, and the dark spirits descended upon the lost cars. The conductor grabbed what looked like a small rocket launcher from the compartment beside the door and bent down on one knee holding it. "Hasta la vista, Don Damondi." The conductor shot the rocket, and black smoke consumed the entire area of broken cars. It boiled until all the creatures attacking the train cars were suffocated by their own smoke. Just as everyone was beginning to feel safe, one of the dark spirits came from above them and grabbed onto Rose. It tried to pull her off the train like it had the others, but it didn't have a chance. She screamed as it picked her up, but she hit the ground just as quickly as she was lifted. Melissa grabbed a handful of the creature's black fog-like skin and wrapped it around her hand. Her eyes flashed white as if light were coming from within her soul and reflecting out of her eyes. "We're done here." She thrusted her other fist up hard through the bottom of the creature's head as it turned to black dust and was swept off the train. The few cars of the train that were left rode into the gate zone between the second and third forests where they'd be safe. The conductor had closed the door, but everyone was staring at Melissa speechless. They looked at her frightened, as if she were a freak. She looked at all of them with a sad expression on her face. Her shoulders and head hung forward as she reached into her bag and pulled out her little silver bell. It was a small bell, and was beautifully engraved with a moon symbol. She looked at the bell in her hand, but before she could ring it, Tony gently laid his hand on top of it. He looked down at her and smiled kindly, seeing the tears in her eyes. He took the bell, putting it back in her bag, then brought her close to him, putting his arms around her as he hugged her. He looked up at the others and stared around at them a moment. She saved her. Meli, you saved her. He squeezed her gently, and she wrapped her arms around him tightly, trying to hide her betrayed expression. The others may have been afraid of her, but it was obvious to her now that Tony wasn't. It's okay, Meli. You're one of us. No one here is afraid of you. You're just so powerful already. It's astounding. But it's okay, Meli. We're okay. You're not afraid? I was, but not now. Meli, you just saved Rose. You're amazing. Meli looked up at Tony and smiled as he wiped the tears off her cheeks. Rule number 4. Never judge someone based on appearance or past, only by actions, or not at all if you can avoid it. I understand if you are afraid, though. That wasn't exactly... Tony cut off her sentence. He didn't want her to feel down on herself. Don't. Not another word. Not another word about it. You're amazing, Meli. That's all there is to it. No one would dare judge you after what you just did. You saved her. You saved her. Meli smiled as Tony pulled her into a soft hug. Before any more could be said, the conductor came over and gave her a smile and patted her on the back. Good job, kiddo. That was a very brave thing you just did there. Looks to me like we found this trip's prodigy. He walked up to the front to get the situation figured out at the engine and make sure they were still safe to keep going on in the morning. Suddenly, from nowhere, Rose hugged Meli tightly and wouldn't let go. Thank you so much. I didn't want to die. I don't want to die. Just thank you. I'm your new best friend. I'm sticking with you. Rose turned around and looked at John with a disgusted look. I can't believe you pushed me. Whoa now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I'd never do that. At least, not usually. Rose, it wasn't his fault. Those dark spirits hypnotize people into acting on their worst thoughts and fears. John probably didn't want to push you, but his mind was clouded by the dark magic that the spirits use to confuse us. Rose, I am so sorry. Yeah, you better be, John. We're all right. John smiled as she came over beside him. Meli sat down in a seat, and Tony sat beside her. Can we sit here? Huh? Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead. Rose and John sat in the seat facing them. Meli stared out the window as Tony sat beside her with Rose and John across from them. Everyone around them was talking about Melissa. How she was already so powerful, how scary it was when her eyes lit up glowing that white color, how amazing it was when she just nailed that creature right in the head. You'd think they would have been terrified since people just died. But these people were casters. Yeah, people died, but they knew that would happen from the beginning. The conductor came back and counted them to see who was left alive, then walked over to Melissa. That was quite the little burst of energy you had back there. Mind talking about it? You asked the questions, and I've got the answers. She smiled up at him, and everyone crowded around to see what she'd say. Well, we'll talk about it later, maybe. Now that everyone's gathered. There's only 15 of you left. I've counted. And this is the smallest group we've ever had after just the first 2 forests. I hope you're all strong, because it would be really horrible if we lost anyone else. The conductor looked at Meli, almost as if he were asking her permission. We've decided to drive through the Forest of Whispers tonight, so that we can be the Forest of Faces by morning. By the look of these folk, I'm saying they're going to be more visually stimulated. What do you think? Oh, yeah, I just... What is it? Meli, what's wrong? Nothing. We can go ahead. That sounds like a good plan. Meli smiled, and the conductor nodded and went to tell the engineer the plan, but he was stopped by a young woman who looked absolutely terrified. So what? Then they just died and no one even cares? I mean, What kind of twisted place is this?
You knew people would die when you signed up for this, sweetie. Better watch what you say or you could be next.
What do you mean?
The train knows when someone's too soft-hearted to make it all the way to the end. Those people were actually spared the pain of seeing others die right in front of them. If you have an issue with it, then just step off the back.
You're insane!
No. I'm a Castor. Everyone was trying to relax and mentally cope with what just happened. Meanwhile, Meli was a wreck. But not for the same reason the others were. Rose and Tony both noticed and were slightly worried. Meli, are you sure you're okay?
You look absolutely pale.
What?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just tired.
Well, we'll be going through the forest of whispers soon. Do you think you can handle it? We're gonna need you.
Yeah, I'll be fine. I'm fine.
Rose could tell she didn't want to talk about it, and started talking to John. Tony touched Meli's shoulder as she turned towards him. Meli, what happens in the Forest of Whispers? I've read some of your book, but I can't read ahead as you've told me before.
Basically, the voices in your head, you know, the ones that tell you not good enough, the bad ones, they attack you, and you can hear them whispered as if they're being said out loud. It's not physical torture, but it is emotional torture, and I don't know. I'm hoping I can silence mine, but those voices drive people insane.
It's okay, Meli. Come here.
Tony pulled her over and put his arm around her. She smiled and leaned into him.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Meli. If it weren't for you, I would have never gotten on the train.
You're gonna regret that, you know.
Are you kidding? I've seen more magic in a couple days with you than a lifetime without you. I wouldn't give that up for the world.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
The conductor came back and announced to everyone what was going to happen.
All right, everyone. We're having some mechanical difficulties, so we're going to have to stop here for the night and make some repairs. First thing in the morning, we'll be going through the Forest of Whispers, so happy thoughts, everyone. He left again, and Meli sighed with relief. Thank goodness. A moment of calm. Tony laughed as she leaned against him, resting. Can I rest here? Do I have to move? You don't have to move an inch, Meli. He put her hair down and smiled as she closed her eyes and drifted into a little dream. Tony laid his head back onto the seat. Rose and John smiled at them, then jokingly mocked them. Rose laid against John and put her wrist to her forehead, pretending to be dramatic.
Oh, John, can I lay here? I don't want to move.
Of course, baby, whatever you want. They laughed, and Tony just rolled his eyes and laid back resting. When Rose realized he didn't care if they mocked him, she didn't find it funny anymore. Wow, you really don't care, do you? Nope. Tony didn't even open his eyes to acknowledge them. He just rested his head on the seat and relaxed.
How old are you, Tony?
Me? I'm 20. Really? Yeah. How old are you two?
I'm 16.
I'm 17. Makes sense.
How old's Melissa?
She's 18.
Rose rested against John's shoulder, and he smiled as she and Melissa both went off to sleep. John looked up at Tony, kind of questioning his nonchalantness.
Hey. Psst, Tony. Tony raised his head slowly and opened his eyes with a smile. Yeah? How did you meet Melissa? At the train station. Why? So you just walked up and started talking to her? Well, actually, she started talking to me. Really? Yep. She's a strange one. Strange? She saved Rose today, and for all we know, the rest of us too. You better be nice to her, John. No. I didn't mean that as a bad thing. I wonder how she's so strong already, you know? I think Melissa is special. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all that matters.
John smiled and nodded as they both laid back again. Tony felt Meli shift a little and took the chance to move his left arm that had fallen asleep.
Meli kicked her feet up and rested her head gently against his knee as she drifted off to sleep again. Tony looked down at her and scoffed. Well, at least you're comfy. He smiled, moving some hair out of her face, again laying his head back and resting it on the back of the seat. In the middle of the night, Tony had a bad dream that his guitar had caught fire and was burning in his hands. He woke up freaked out, but when he checked his bag under his cloak, he found his guitar was still in its tiny form and safely inside. He smiled, closing the bag, then glanced down at Meli. She had bundled up part of her cloak as a pillow and was using the rest of it as a blanket. Tony thought of doing that too, but he figured he should be prepared in case something happened unexpectedly. This train ride was going to give them all paranoia and probably PTSD for sure. As he thought this, Tony immediately attempted to push his thoughts out of his mind and close his eyes again to sleep. Before he even fully shut his eyelids, the conductor walked over and kneeled beside their seat. "Hey, Tony, kid, wake up." Tony spoke with his eyes closed as the conductor stood there beside him. "You do realize I'm not a kid, right?" The conductor looked as if he was in his 40s at most, and yet he seemed as if he'd done this several times before. "Tony, I'm 45 years old. To me, you're all kids." Guess that makes sense." Tony drifted a moment until the conductor spoke to him again. "Tony, huh? Yes, sir." "The girl, is she..." Yeah, she's just sleeping. Why?" "She is far more powerful than anyone on this train realized." "Oh? What do you mean?" "Boy, you're her casting partner, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Haven't you noticed anything about her that you found a bit strange?" "You mean, besides everything?" "I'm serious, young." "Well, I mean, she's different, but she's one of us. I'm sure any one of these other casters would vouch for her being on our side." "Oh, no, you misunderstand me, boy. I'm not questioning if she's on her side. I'm simply curious as to how she got so strong before boarding the train." Suddenly, Meli sat up from her sleeping position and looked directly at them both. "You want to know why I'm so strong?" The conductor was slightly startled, but nodded quietly. Yes, ma'am." "It's because I practiced. I come from a long bloodline of powerful casters. The reason I'm so strong is because my father went insane one day when I was young and tried to kill me. Therefore, I learned at a young age how to be strong and think on my feet." But why did he... "It doesn't matter why. What matters is that my mother killed him before he could kill me, and that's why I'm alive today. Do you understand the kind of trauma that can inflict on a child?" "No, I do not know that kind of pain, miss." "Good. Be thankful. Some of us have found strength through pain. Hopefully, none of these people have to ever endure that." Meli pushed her cloak up against Tony's knee and laid back down. "Is this okay, Tony?" "Yes, Meli, that's fine." Tony and the conductor watched her doze off. Then Tony looked up at the conductor. "I think you should go." The conductor walked away. Then Tony put a hand on Meli's arm gently. "I'm sorry for that little outburst. I just wanted him to go away." "Is that why you're worried about going into the Forest of Whispers? Because you're scared you'll hear your father's voice?" Meli was quiet a moment, then sat up beside Tony and held onto his arm, staring over at Rose and John as they slept. "Tony, do you know how envious I am of people who only have to hear their own voices?" "You don't just hear your own demons, do you? You hear everyone else's too, don't you, Meli?" Meli nodded her head once, then looked up at Tony with a smile. "My own voices I can handle. They never really say bad things to me. But everyone else's?" She looked back at Rose and John, then whispered to Tony, "They just piss me off. I never had to deal with negative body images or anything like that growing up. It's less about hearing the voices for me, and more about the screeching, agonizing pain I'll feel from everyone else." Tony wrapped both his arms around Meli, and she nodded off in his arms. "It's okay. I'll help you keep the voices out. I promise. I'll do my best, Meli." Tony held her close as she drifted into a blissful sleep. Tony kept thinking all night about what she'd said to the conductor. Her voice echoed in his head. It's because I practiced. A long line of castors. My father went insane. He tried to kill me. My mother killed him before he could kill me. Do you understand? Kill me. Tony shot awake from that horrible nightmare he was having. Her voice was almost demanding him to take her. She was perfectly quiet and smiling blissfully in her sleep, but he couldn't escape the voices, though no matter how hard he tried to fight it. Soon he began to hear other voices around him. Everyone was sleeping, and yet Tony could hear the voices all around him. The conductor walked up to him and put a hand on his shoulder. Tony, be calm. We're approaching the Forest of Whispers. The voices will only get worse. It's okay, son. They're auditory hallucinations. Physically, you're safe. Tony stuttered, trying to talk, but it was difficult to breathe, let alone speak. Tony stood up, looking around them, beginning to freak out. No, we're not. No one is safe. We need to get out of the forest as quickly as possible. We haven't even entered it yet, Tony. We're just getting close. No. Tony, snap out of it. The conductor shouted, and everyone woke up around them and stumbled closer. Meli sat up and saw Tony panicking. She grabbed a hold of him and pulled him down to sit beside her. Tony, it's okay. Tony, shh, we're okay. We'll be okay. Tony jumped around frightened and looked around them frantically. Who's there? Get out! Get away from us! Meli grabbed him as the conductor and John forced Tony to sit. Meli grabbed him and pulled his head against her chest as she leaned back against the window. Tony, can you hear me? Meli, the voices, they won't stop. Tony's eyes began to tear up as he bit into his own lip, trying to take the headache that came with the voices. Please, stop. Please. Tony, focus on me, sweetie. Focus here. Can you hear me? I hear you, Meli. I hear you, Meli. Shh. Focus on me, sweetie. It's okay. We're okay. What Tony didn't know was that he wasn't hearing Meli out loud. He was hearing her in his head, in his mind. But Tony wasn't the only one being affected by the whispers. Others began to fall down onto their knees and clutch their heads in their hands tightly. Every time Tony flinched, Meli just held them tighter and kept her eyes closed. She knew what was to come, but Tony was trying to help her, which meant she needed to help him. And that concludes Chapter 4. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back with Chapter 5 very soon. If you haven't already, like, subscribe up below, support the channel. And until next time, love you very much. Bye.